In an ordinary supermarket in a small town, the calm of a regular night turns into a nightmare. An armed group bursts in violently, but we soon discover that they are not after money or hostages. They are hunting something far darker, an alien threat hidden among the customers. What begins as a robbery ends as a brutal hunt where no one is safe. So today we will watch a movie called Alien Raiders. The film begins in the quiet town of Buck Lake, where we meet a young man named Benny, who works at the local Hastings market. Benny is outside arranging shopping carts, but then goes back into the store and asks his manager, Tarky, for some alcohol to clean his hands. Tarky tells him to go to the register, where Lisa is ringing up the groceries of her stepfather, police officer Steve. Everything seems like a peaceful afternoon until we see a group in a van recording a tape and preparing to invade the market. Soon after, a man enters and locks the store doors while the manager announces closing time. Benny walks through the aisles until he runs into a police officer named Hudson. The man asks him for some information, and the boy quickly tells him where to find what he is looking for. Benny straightens a few shelves and keeps going until he discovers one of his co-workers dead, only to be immediately surprised by two armed people. Another of the men already has a colleague as a hostage. The woman orders him to get down on the floor, and then we go back to the other attackers. One of them is filming everything. The cameraman realizes that Tarky is trying to call the police and intercepts him quickly, threatening him. However, the criminals do not seem interested in stealing anything. One of the men begins analyzing the customers, searching for something, moving from person to person and scanning their minds. The leader of the group appears to be a man named Ritter, who orders the rest to keep the hostages separated. Each one is placed in a different aisle under guard. One of the members warns the others to be careful, stating that they know they are there. The man checking the people is Spooky, and when he examines a woman, he seems to find what they are after. The woman tries to escape, and Spooky alerts his partners, who quickly kill her or whatever she truly was. Meanwhile, the man watching Officer Hudson loses focus for an instant. Hudson seizes the chance and kills him. Without wasting time, he immediately calls for reinforcements. The men try to reach their partner but get no response. Hudson heads toward them and a shootout erupts, though he soon decides to retreat into the aisles. While the cameraman watches the other hostages, Ritter and Kane go after Hudson and find their dead comrade. Hudson, moving through the aisles, encounters Spooky and shoots him without hesitation. Ritter and Kane hear the shot and head in that direction. Ritter quickly reaches the aisle and Hudson orders him not to move, but the man keeps advancing until Kane appears behind him and kills Hudson. Kane finds the officer's phone and learns he managed to call reinforcements. Knowing this, he immediately informs the group. Ritter tries to save Spooky, but his wounds are fatal and he soon dies. Then Kane and Logan return to the hostages. Kane says they must get out urgently, but Ritter insists on staying because he refuses to abandon their mission and asks for more time, which Kane reluctantly accepts. Ritter informs Sterling that the police are on their way and asks if she is still committed to the plan. She confirms and agrees to continue. Ritter mentions that before dying, Spooky swore, "The thing was there." Kane moves the hostages elsewhere while Ritter uses Spooky's blood to leave a warning at the entrance, telling anyone not to come closer. Soon the police arrive and release some of the hostages already examined. While Ritter asks Kane to stop those not yet tested, we see Sterling examining the woman marked by Spooky and affirming that the specimen is evolving toward the 8th year of gestation. Ritter reunites with the team and notes that the police are busy interrogating the hostages, so he decides to activate Plan B. Outside, while a woman is being questioned, Officer Steve arrives at the scene, saying his stepdaughter is inside and insisting they must act quickly. Inside the market, the group is divided over Ritter's decision to continue. Kane questions how they will carry out Plan B without a new identifier, to which Ritter replies that they will have to find another. Sterling reminds him that the police will not allow anyone inside. Ritter suggests that Charlotte take on the role, but Kane laughs and asks if he has already forgotten what happened with Scott. Finally, the group decides to test the hostages while Charlotte has not yet arrived. Sterling warns it is dangerous, but Ritter counters that Spooky had guaranteed it was safe. Sterling tries to persuade him that among the hostages there are young people, but Ritter insists, saying the thing cannot leave. Sterling agrees and asks for the necessary equipment. Kane does not approve of the plan, so Logan volunteers to fetch it. Ritter asks Sterling to examine the bodies, since some may be infected, and orders Logan to record everything. He also commands Kane to turn off the store lights, and soon everything is in darkness. Steve, seeing this, requests that the external spotlights be turned on so the intruders cannot locate the police position. Inside the market, Logan moves Spooky's body to the cold chamber where the other corpses are kept. On his way out, we see the dead officer's body begin to convulse and the lights flicker. Then they begin the first test, forcing the hostages to drink a liter of milk. One woman fails to do so, and Kane, increasingly impatient, demands she finish and warns the manager that he will be the first examined. When Kane leaves the room, Lisa mentions that the officer's gun was left in the chamber with the dead and that they could use it to try to escape alive. One of the men insults her for suggesting it, but she explains her reasons, saying her stepfather is a police negotiator and she has heard many reports of such situations, insisting that these men have not even considered negotiation. Meanwhile, outside, Steve and Officer Cooper inspect the suspect's van. They approach cautiously and Steve decides to open the rear doors, finding inside a large supply of high-caliber ammunition, organized weaponry, and several tapes, all showing the image of an unknown man's face. The discovery confirms the group is not involved in a simple hostage situation, but in something much larger and premeditated. Cooper then informs the negotiator that the van is registered to Aaron Ritter, a 43-year-old widower with a clean record who worked for many years at JPL. Intrigued, Steve asks what JPL is, and Cooper replies that it is the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, an advanced research unit linked to space exploration. The mention of JPL raises even more suspicions about the attackers and their intentions. Steve shows urgency in establishing phone contact with Ritter, but Cooper informs him that all cell signals have been jammed. So Steve orders an alternative communication method to attempt negotiation before something worse happens. Inside the market, the group returns to the hostages room, and Ritter formally introduces his team: Sterling, a doctor and biology specialist, Logan, in charge of records and equipment, and Kane, who, though not clearly defined, appears to be the one carrying out the most violent actions. One of the older hostages, in desperation, begs them to release the younger ones, but Ritter refuses, saying that unfortunately everyone is at risk and no one is above suspicion. He then begins to explain the reason for their presence, revealing that they are looking for a host carrying an extremely dangerous organism, something they tracked to Buck Lake. Ritter admits that the only member capable of identifying the host, Spooky, was killed during the confrontation, and now they will have to use a riskier method to discover who has been exposed. Manager Tark will be the first to undergo the new test. Ritter explains that the milk consumed alters the body's internal pH, and this should cause a visible reaction in carriers. He points out that those showing no signs will be safely released. One hostage asks what will happen if someone is infected, and Kane coldly replies, "That person will die." Then they take Tark to a separate room while Kane stays behind to watch the others. Logan documents the whole procedure, starting with Tarky's name written on a container lid, recording each step. Sterling enters and reports that she has examined all the bodies taken to the cold chamber and discovered that they were all fertile women, which reinforces the biological threat they are facing. Ritter interrogates Tarky, asking if he is married, and the man replies that he is divorced. He then tells him to look at his own fingers and say if he sees a red band, which could indicate infection. Tarky denies it, saying he sees nothing. The team begins applying small mind games to distract the manager while Sterling prepares to cut off one of his fingers as part of the physical test. Upon seeing the knife, Tarky panics, recoils, and presses himself against the wall in despair. In the hostages' room, everyone hears the commotion, and Kane decides to check. Desperate, Tarky tries to bargain, offering them the money he had stolen from the register, But the group ignores the proposal and insists on continuing with the protocol. Meanwhile, in the escape plan, the older man says he will go get the gun left in the cold chamber, as agreed with Lisa. But Manny pulls out a knife and says he will go himself. The man convinces him by arguing that he has more experience with firearms, and the four conspirators agree to the change. Lisa instructs that as soon as he opens fire, the others must attack the kidnappers from behind. In the room with the invaders, the phone suddenly rings. Ritter answers skeptically, and on the other end is Steve, who introduces himself as the police negotiator and tries to start a dialogue. He directly asks what the kidnappers want, but Ritter replies that even if he told him, he would not believe it. Steve insists and asks Ritter to try explaining, stating that he has seen it all throughout his career, and maybe he will not be surprised by the answer, but Ritter refuses to cooperate and says he is too busy for such a conversation. Steve tries a more personal angle and mentions that Ritter is far from home, to which the man coldly replies that he goes wherever the job demands. Noticing an emotional crack, Steve asks if Ritter's daughter would be proud of what he is doing, which clearly shakes him for a moment, but he quickly regains control, ignores the provocation, and continues with the plan, demanding that the detective deliver Charlotte. Steve changes the subject and asks if anyone is hurt inside the market, trying to obtain information. But Ritter dismisses it and simply states that Charlotte is being held at a local police station for a drunk-related offense. Steve insists on knowing about the hostages, but Ritter raises his voice and says that the longer they take, the worse everything will be. Realizing he will not get clear answers, Steve reluctantly agrees to continue. In the market, they proceed with the plan, holding the manager tightly, and Sterling, without hesitation, cuts off one of his fingers, causing screams that can be clearly heard from the hostages' room, heightening the tension for everyone. The severed finger is placed in a jar with ice. After 2 minutes, Sterling confirms that there was no reaction, meaning he is clean. Logan looks disappointed and says he was sure Tark was the infected one. Outside, the police review tapes left by Dr. Sterling, in which she explains how these creatures operate and how they can be destroyed. She reveals that freezing them is the best way to prevent them from reproducing, and even shows an X-ray of a specimen that has already reached an advanced stage of evolution. Steve and Cooper watch closely, and one of them asks if she really said it came from a meteorite or some unidentified object, raising further doubts about the origin of the threat. Cooper then informs Steve that Charlotte is on her way and should arrive in about 20 minutes. He later shows Charlotte's record with minor infractions, and soon presents Aaron Ritter's file, revealing that he was fired from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory after being accused of involuntary manslaughter, although he was acquitted. Cooper adds that all the other members linked to Ritter were also dismissed in the same period, and that, according to Ritter's father-in-law, the group regrouped strangely, as if they had formed a sort of club, buying large amounts of weapons and disappearing for months. Back in the market, Benny warns the teacher not to let the freezer door close completely, explaining that it can only be opened from the outside, and that if someone gets trapped, they will not be able to get out. Shortly after, they return Tarky to the hostage's room, and everyone wants to know what was done to him. The manager replies that they cut off his finger, shocking the others. Kane then chooses Lisa as the next to be tested, but she panics and says her father is Detective Steve. Ritter appears and asks what is going on, to which Kane replies that Lisa seems to have good connections. Ritter wants to know if Steve is really her father, and she answers that he is only her stepfather. Even so, Ritter orders the plan to continue as normal. Before Kane can take Lisa, Benny volunteers to go in her place and the group accepts, taking him to the next phase of the test. Meanwhile, Charlotte is on her way to the market in a police car, apparently drunk, asking for her sunglasses. The officer drives calmly and asks why she and Ritter have problems, to which Charlotte replies that he ruined everything. The policeman, confused, asks what exactly he ruined. Charlotte begins to explain that she should have helped Ritter in a mission, but she chose to keep using illicit substances and abandoned him. She then asks for the handcuffs to be removed, complaining that they are too tight, but he refuses, saying they will arrive soon. To distract her, he turns on the radio, but Charlotte starts behaving strangely, restless, and with unexpected strength, she manages to free herself from the cuffs, leaving marks on her wrists. In the market, the group begins the same process with Benny, who frightened asks if there is a correct answer that can prevent them from cutting his finger. Ritter tells him he cannot reveal it and then asks why he volunteered instead of the girl. Benny insists on knowing if there is anything he can do to avoid what is about to happen, but no one answers him. Ritter regrets it, and they cut off his finger. Outside, the police examine tapes showing people running in terror, trying to hide in a basement. In the room, Kane congratulates Benny for his bravery. Soon they hear the scream of a woman, and Sterling confirms she is not the target either. Ritter asks how many are left, and Sterling replies 3. She believes Charlotte will not be needed anymore, since she always appears when someone dies. Ritter says she is just an addict, but will be essential to trap the creature. They argue, but Logan interrupts them when he notices the woman's finger beginning to regenerate. She lets out a terrifying scream, attacks the group with supernatural strength, and Ritter manages to kill her. Kane tries to contact the group, but getting no answer, he decides to investigate. The hostages take advantage of the confusion to plan taking the dead officer's gun. The teacher goes to the freezer, grabs the weapon, but before returning, he is attacked and killed. The sound of the gunshot startles everyone. Ritter informs Steve that Lisa is still alive, but threatens that if Charlotte is not delivered, another person will die. Steve asks for 10 minutes. Logan reports that the Sentinel almost infected Sterling and insists the creature was different. They notice the teacher's absence and, under pressure, Benny reveals that he went into the freezer. Kane and Logan investigate and find the teacher's remains. Soon after, the officer's body rises, and they face him with gunfire. Outside, Charlotte arrives and hands over the cuffs, surprising everyone with her abilities. Speaking with Steve, she reveals that the aliens infect humans like a virus, turning them into violent and strong hosts. Ritter finds Kane wounded, who says the virus is in the officer and believes he is the king. He confesses that he was infected and asks Ritter to kill him. Ritter accepts the request and executes him. Back in the market, Ritter tells Sterling that the king was the policeman. He states he is going to hunt the monster and asks her to take care of the hostages. Steve discovers that Charlotte has been infected and can now see the aliens. Ritter finds Logan's body and finishes him off, drawing the monster's attention. The hostages attack Sterling and take her gun. Manny celebrates having taken control, but he is hurled by the creature. Ritter tries to shoot and misses, and the monster devours Manny. Steve tries to enter, but Charlotte stops him. Ritter explains to Benny that if they want to survive, they must trust them. Sterling shows that she also submitted to the test, and Ritter only asks for 10 minutes. Steve demands Lisa's release, but Ritter proposes an exchange, Charlotte for Lisa. Charlotte quickly checks Steve and confirms he is clean. Ritter explains the plan, but before finishing, he hears noises and hangs up. After that, Steve orders the police to prepare to enter. Charlotte tries to stop them but cannot. Lisa still does not trust them, but Benny reminds her that she herself saw the creature. They decide to help. The group explores the market and finds a locked door. In the dark aisles, they discover Manny's body. Ritter warns that they will have to leave through the main entrance. Suddenly, Sterling and Tarky see a shadow. Tarky thinks they are being cornered, but Ritter says the creature only wants to kill. Steve sees flashlights and notices their slowness, which strikes him as odd. The group advances, hears a roar, and Tarky knocks over the jar with his finger. When he tries to retrieve it, he is brutally killed. Ritter sends everyone to the manager's office. Then he opens the main door and encounters Steve, who demands to know where Lisa is. Ritter lies, saying she is dead, but then confesses she is alive and proposes a temporary alliance. Sterling reports that she shot the aberration 6 times. Soon after, the creature reappears but flees when hit by multiple gunshots. Lisa and Benny devise a plan. He offers to distract the creature, but the girl refuses to leave him. Steve insists on rescuing Lisa before continuing. Ritter reveals where the office is and asks that when they leave, they let him finish the job. Steve finds the young people and they all embrace. Charlotte uses her powers to lure the king. When Steve and the kids are leaving, the police storm the place. Suddenly, the creature lunges violently at Ritter. Sterling grabs her gun and Steve fires to draw its attention. Ritter seizes the chance, stabs the creature, and rips it from the host. He calls for help and all the police open fire, killing the monster but also injuring Ritter. Infected, he asks to be killed, and Sterling grants his last wish. Minutes later, Steve promises Sterling that if everything is proven, she will have her freedom. Charlotte warns over the radio that that was not the king. Sterling believes it must be one of the kids. Benny and Lisa are in the police car. When Benny calls the girl, he notices she is acting strange. As he tries to get out, he realizes he is locked in. He points the gun, and she tells him she will always love him. Then, only Benny's screams are heard. I hope you enjoyed the video.